I was just wondering, just on that note, the OpenPilot project, that is part of that, I guess, the software stack that interfaces with the models and executes kind of the policy and interacts with the car API, or does that fulfill a different role? Because it is kind of more broadly a project related to kind of autonomy and robotics generally, or am I misunderstanding?
Yes. So, I mean, the goal of OpenPilot is to be general robotics, but we're clearly focused on driving right now. But a lot of the things that are written in OpenPilot are things like, okay, well, there's a UI, and then there's a localizer, which is written in classical code that like takes in all these input sensors and makes a best estimate of the current motion of the device. You know, that's robotics or driving. Then there's, like you said, there's this whole layer of interfacing with the car. So that's also part of OpenPilot. How do you communicate with the car and manage like the state machines? And then in general, it's also an operating system, right? So there's many different threads and processes running, and those intercommunicate, and those need to get managed. And so that's OpenPilot. But a lot of the decision making about what happens and how to control the car essentially happens inside the neural network.
It's pretty cool. I'm curious. I think the space that you've chosen in terms of addressing the need and where there is vehicles without autonomy capability altogether, traditional. Below you, and then kind of above you, there are the fully integrated, vehicles. We talk about things like Teslas and their competitors, where the whole, the hardware software is all working together for the whole vehicle, and that gives you another level of capability. How do you target the level of capability that comma is addressing in terms of when you're doing this, what is kind of an add-on to an existing vehicle that doesn't have any autonomy capability? Like, how do you think about the problem of what you can add value to by bringing autonomy capability, and what's the constraint? What's too much without having a fully integrated platform from the get-go, that you're manufacturing out of a factory?
So just to be clear, our mission is to solve self-driving cars while shipping intermediaries. And now that, we're kind of evolving that to solve robotics. So that is what we see everything as. We're trying to build solutions that, genuinely do solve the AI and the applied robotics problem in a real and genuine way. That's the starting point of how we think about it. It's not that we think like, we don't really start from the product or the user side. But given that starting point, we then think, okay, if we want to make progress on the robotics problem, on self-driving cars, how do we have intermediaries that make sense? We don't want to be, doing research in a lab and saying like, we're never going to release everything until it's done. We want to make progress, and at the meantime, be able to ship useful features. So we really focus on how do we create some kind of end-to-end solution that's scalable and can be, the most intelligent driving agent that can drive better than a human. But then we just kind of see, okay, given this system, can we apply this in a way that's useful to people? And then we kind of figure out, which cars does this work well enough on that can be supported? Because you were talking about constraints, like there are some cars that have certain constraints that make them unusable for OpenPilot, and so then that's not as interesting. Does that kind of answer your question? I'm not sure.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you expanded on that. I may have had too narrow a vision in my understanding of what you were addressing there. So I like the way that you are kind of iteratively solving that problem in the large.
Yeah, so I mean, the distinction is, I think we're trying to make incremental steps towards some late stage solution that also have incremental usefulness to people. And I think that's kind of where we differ from a lot of other people. I think a lot of other people are like, everything or nothing kind of approach. And I think that's just generally a bad approach. I think we want to make money along the way. We want to pay our own bills. We run our own data center. And, those limitations obviously mean that we run with 100x less compute in our data center than, Waymo or Tesla. And that obviously has some side effects. But I think in the long run, this isn't really a big deal. As long as we're making progress towards some solution and shipping useful products, I think the long-term future looks bright.